Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Just a couple of ground rules and setting here. We'll have statements by both the Secretary and the Chairman, and then we'll open up for questions. I will moderate. I'll call on you. Please identify who you are and your outlet when you ask, and if you can, limit follow-ups. We don't have a whole heck of a lot of time today. Both gentlemen have busy schedules, so we're going to try to keep this thing moving. So thanks again, and with that, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks, John. First of all, let me start by thanking all of you for coming today, and let me also tell you just how much I appreciate the work that you do. Our free and independent press is one of America's greatest strengths, and when you hold us accountable, it makes us better and it makes our country stronger. So thanks for what you do. It's been a very busy 100 days. We've been focused on my top 3 priorities, and I'll quickly review what our team has accomplished thus far. Clearly, we have a lot more to do, but I'm very proud of the progress that we have made to this point. As you saw in my initial message to the force, our top priority is to defend this nation and to protect our interests. And today, the most urgent challenge that we face is COVID-19. And so the department has stepped up to save American lives through vaccination. We've been a part of a whole of government effort to get shots in the arms, and active duty and National Guard troops have administered more than 14 million total shots to the American people. We've also been moving out quickly to vaccinate the force and our broader DoD family. We've administered more than 3 million shots to DoD personnel, and that's more than 550,000 fully vaccinated service members and more than 644,000 fully vaccinated civilians, contractors, and beneficiaries at home and overseas. We're also working on the global challenge of controlling this pandemic once and for all. In that regard, I should say just a word about the crisis facing our friends in India. We're moving urgently to support India's frontline healthcare workers, and 3 U.S. Air Force C-5M Super Galaxies and a C-17 Globemaster III have already delivered many tons of critical supplies. For a sense of some of the wider strategic changes in the works, let me point you to the remarks that I made in Hawaii last week at the change of command for Indo-Pacific Command. The department is working together on what I call integrated deterrence, which is a new vision of how we defend the nation in all domains of conflict in a time when technology is changing the nature of warfare. And that's especially important for our priority theater of operations, the Indo-Pacific. We've started a global force posture review to make sure we're positioned well for the challenges that we face around the globe, but certainly they're in the region as well. And the China Task Force, which is ably led by Dr. Eli Ratner, is developing an important set of recommendations. Further afield, we've condemned Russian aggression in eastern Ukraine and underscored our commitment to helping Ukraine's forces better defend their country. And we're moving to tackle one of the very few truly existential threats that we face, and that's the climate crisis. Our second key priority is taking care of our people. All of our people. And towards that end, Deputy Secretary Hicks has convened the Deputies Workforce Council, which is a new senior leadership forum that addresses the most pressing people management and personnel policy and total force requirements. And as you all know, my first directive was on sexual assault and that was on my second day in office. We established an independent review commission, and I'm going to have an open mind about what they come up with and the recommendations that they make. You've heard me say this before, but sexual assault is a problem that plagues us. It is a readiness issue, it is a leadership issue, and we're going to lead real change for real results. We're also tackling the problem of violent extremists in our ranks and our workforce. And since ordering a stand down on this issue, we established the Countering Extremism Working Group. And clearly we have a lot of work to do, and I want to be blunt. There is no place for hatred or bigotry or extremist behavior in this department or in the military. This department has an open door to any qualified American who wants to serve. And that's a matter of both national principle and national security. Diversity throughout the force is a source of strength. So we can't afford to deprive ourselves of the talents and the voices of the full range of the nation that we defend. Third, we brought a renewed focus on teamwork on several levels. In part, that's about outreach to our allies and partners who multiply our strength and make the world more stable and secure. As you know, my first trips were all about investing in those relationships, including important business that we've already conducted with the leaders of Japan and the Republic of Korea and Germany, the UK, India, Israel, and NATO. But this is also about how the department fits into the interagency and works with our teammates across the U.S. government. There is no daylight between this department and the State Department on a basic principle, and that principle is that in securing America's interest, diplomacy always comes first. And lastly, teamwork means a new spirit within this building. And so it's time to get back to professionalism and normal order and good process. And finally, let me end with Afghanistan. The president has decided to end America's involvement in our longest war. And we're going to do just that. And so far, less than 1 week in, the drawdown is going according to plan. At the same time, we are shifting to a new bilateral relationship with our Afghan security partners, where we'll work toward our common goals in some new and different ways. And I'm grateful for the effort that Generals McKenzie and Miller have put into planning for all of this. And of course, I am enormously proud of the men and women of the military who are now and who have for the past 20 years dedicated themselves to an important mission. That mission is now changing, but they are meeting the challenge with the same professionalism with which they have met every task assigned to them. And as I said in Brussels, standing side by side with our allies, we're going to do everything that we can to make this drawdown deliberate, orderly, and safe, and to protect our people and our partners. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to the chairman to offer some specifics on the drawdown. Joe Milley.
Thanks, Secretary. And I want to take first a moment to thank the men and women of the Joint Force, Active Duty, Reserve, National Guard, for their incredible work day in and day out in defense of our nation. I'd like to highlight that in addition to Afghanistan, we're engaged in training exercises, contingency operations, and humanitarian efforts throughout the world. And the Joint Force is committed to global stability and security, defense of the United States, and our service members stand ready at all times to protect our security. With respect to Afghanistan, our primary military objective at this point is a change of mission to conduct a safe, responsible, coordinated, and deliberate retrograde of U.S. forces from Afghanistan in good order. We will do this in a synchronized fashion, shoulder to shoulder with our allies and NATO partners, and we've been steadily reducing our presence for almost a decade and we are now in the final phase of that strategic retrograde. As you know, we've been transferring steadily functions and responsibilities to the Afghan security forces for a considerable amount of time. The President of the United States has given us a window to be complete no later than September. I don't want to here put precise dates in public on our exact milestones because there are many variables that will factor in to the ultimate outcome. I'm confident, however, that our ability to meet the objective in the time frame that the President has directed. With respect to the Taliban, there continue to be sustained levels of violent attacks, primarily against the ANSF. There have been about 80 to 120 enemy-initiated attacks a day for the past year, and that has also been sustained since 1 May. There have been no attacks against U.S. and coalition forces since the retrograde began on about 1 May, and that is also consistent for the past year. The ANSF, the Afghan National Security Forces, and the government of Afghanistan at this time remain cohesive. And the President's intent, the President of the United States' intent, is to continue to support both the ANSF and the government of Afghanistan. To date, we have closed one base in Helmand. Approximately 60 C-17 equivalents have departed with various equipment and rolling stock, and over 1,300 pieces of equipment have been transferred either to the Defense Logistics Agency for destruction or to the ANSF for their use. To maximize force protection, we have bolstered our security with additional firepower. The SecDef has directed 6 additional B-52 long-range strike bombers and a package of 12 fighter bombers, F-18s, postured to offer contingency support. In addition to that, the SecDef has extended the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group. We came in with our allies, and we will depart with our allies shoulder to shoulder. And together, we are all going to execute a fully coordinated, synchronized retrograde in good order. And thank you, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Bob?
Thank you. I have a question for each of you, if I may, on Afghanistan, Mr. Secretary. General Milley just referred to the high level of violence in Afghanistan. In some respects, the violence has increased in recent days, even as you've begun the drawdown. My question really is, what's to stop the Taliban from overwhelming the Afghan forces, particularly in the south, if not in the whole country, creating instability, additional instability, even in Pakistan? Is there something you can do during the summer to stop that from happening? And if I may ask a quick question of General Milley, the Secretary referred a minute ago in his opening statement to different ways in which the U.S. will interact with the Afghan forces to support the Afghan forces in the future. He used the phrase different ways. I'm wondering if one of those different ways has to do with training Afghan forces in third countries outside of Afghanistan. Is that an option? Thank you.
So, thanks, Bob. I think the first part of the question is what's to stop the Taliban? Well, we're hopeful that the Afghan security forces will play the major role in stopping the Taliban. And I know what we're seeing unfold is what we expected to unfold, increased pressure. And we've seen an instance of down in Lashkar Gah of the Afghan security forces conducting a counterattack and performing, fairly well. We will continue to support them after we retrograde with funding, with over-the-horizon logistics. We will remain partners with the Afghan government, with the Afghan military, and certainly we hope through our continued support, the Afghan security forces can be effective. But they have a pretty significant capability, but it's going to, we expect that this will be a challenge for them.
So Bob, there's 300,000+ Afghan army, Afghan police. It's their country. They've been leading the fight for several years now. We've been supporting them for sure, but they've been leading the fight. And I'm personal witness, as well as many of us, that the Afghan security forces can fight. And they're fighting for their own country now. So It's not a foregone conclusion, in my professional military estimate, that the Taliban automatically win in Kabul Falls or any of those kind of dire predictions. That's not a foregone conclusion. There's a significant military capability in the Afghan government, and we have to see how this plays out. With respect to our support in different ways, the Secretary just mentioned over the horizon. The intent is to keep an embassy open and to keep supporting the Afghan government and the Afghan security forces with financial aid, money. We'll also continue to take a look at training them in perhaps other locations. We don't know. We haven't figured that out 100% yet. But also things like maintenance support and perhaps CT support from over the horizon. There's a lot of ways to do that, and we're very capable of doing it, and we're working on those plans right now.
So the training in other countries is an option you're pursuing?
It's possible. I mean, there's a lot of different options out there, and we haven't settled on one of them yet. When we get some finalized plans put together, we'll brief those to the Secretary for approval.
Helene?
Thank you. This is for both of you. I'd like to address the issue of air support in Afghanistan. Afghan commanders, as we both know, are pleading for more air support now in key regions that are under attack. At what point do we turn off the spigot? Do we wean them off, or do we make them, or are we going to make them go cold turkey once all of our troops are out? And I have a follow-up for General Milley.
Thanks, Helene. Again, our focus currently is on the task that the President has assigned us, and that is to retrograde safely and orderly our troops and those of our allies and protect them while doing so. I think General Miller has adequate resources and capabilities to protect themselves, and he has the authorities to protect himself and our troops, and he has the authorities to protect our allies as well, the Afghans. So in terms of when he does what, there's a reason that he's a four-star commander, and certainly he'll make the call on the ground of what he needs to do and when he needs to do it. My focus is just to make sure he has the resources. Once we've left, again, our focus is on providing maintaining a CT capability over the horizon and supporting the Afghans with monetary support and over the horizon logistics where possible.
And Helene, you probably already know this, the Afghan Air Force does 80 to 90% of all airstrikes in support of the Afghan ground forces. We're actually doing very few airstrikes. We do some, but very few relative to the Afghan Air Force. The key will be the Afghan Air Force and their ability to continue providing close air support for the Afghan Army. And you had a follow-on, you said?
Yes, that is exactly my follow-up, is how are we planning then on turning the contracts, our contractors over to the Afghan military, to the Afghan Air Force and the Afghan government, then to provide the maintenance on the planes and stuff for the Afghan Air Force? How are we going to do that?
Well, that's one of the key questions, and I will tell you that the final crossing of T's and dotting of I's of that plan is not yet settled, but maintaining logistic support to the Afghan Air Force is a key task that we have to sort out, doing it over the horizon but also in country. It could be done by contractors. A lot of that's going to be dependent on the conditions, the security conditions on the ground. But the intent is to keep the Afghan Air Force in the air and to provide them with continued maintenance support.
Thank you. David?
This is for both of you. What is the latest estimate of when and where this Chinese rocket will come down? Do you consider it a potential threat to the U.S., and do you have a plan for shooting it down if necessary?
Thanks, David. The latest estimates that I've seen is somewhere between the 8th and 9th, and the experts are still working on that. At this point, we don't have a plan to shoot the rocket down. We're hopeful that it will land in a place where it won't harm anyone, hopefully in the ocean or someplace like that. I think this speaks to the fact that for those of us who operate in the space domain, that there is a requirement, there should be a requirement to operate in a safe and thoughtful mode, and make sure that we take those kinds of things into consideration as we plan and conduct operations.
Do you even have the capability to shoot it down?
David, we have, as you know, we have the capability to do a lot of things, but we don't have a plan to shoot it down as we speak.
Let's see, Jen?
Secretary Austin, you said that COVID-19 is your priority. It's your greatest threat right now. Given the amount of vaccine hesitancy in the military and among military families, why won't you order troops and their families to get vaccinated? Isn't this a readiness issue? And General Milley, there was recently a DIA report suggesting that al-Qaeda's top leaders are in Iran. Who is in Iran, and where is Zawahiri?
That was quite a swing of subject matter there, Jan. Thanks. Regarding the COVID vaccine, as you know, Jen, it's still under emergency use authorization. We've been constantly reviewing our performance and our options. We look at the data every day. We still believe that the right focus is to provide the best information available, and this will help our troops to make informed decisions. And certainly, you know, the approach I took when I elected to take the vaccine very early on when it was available. I think armed with the right information, accurate information, troops will make good choices. And so our plan currently is to continue on the path that we're on. You know, we're using about 80% of the vaccines that we've been provided, and vaccines are going into arms at a good rate. So I think you know, the wise thing to do is to continue to evaluate and follow the course that we're on right now.
And Jen, I'm not going to obviously comment on intelligence reports on who is in Iran, not in Iran, et cetera. And with respect to Zawahiri, if I knew where he was, he would be the first one to know that.
Megan?
I would probably be the first one to know if he knows, but then certainly you after that.
He would be the
Jen.
first. Then this. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. There's a president yeah, absolutely. The president would be the first of everybody to know.
Correction.
So.
Correct the record.
Megan?
Secretary Austin, your independent review commission has recommended taking sexual assault out of the military chain of command. General Milley has weighed in and said that he agrees with that idea, and the Senate has said they think they have enough votes to get that passed legally. So have you formed an opinion on the matter? And if you haven't, what is holding you back from forming an opinion, given all of that advice that you've gotten so far?
Well, first, I think you know that the commission is still doing its work. There are several lines of effort that it's focused on. The accountability line of effort was the very first. And so they provided me an initial readout of their work on that line of effort. And of course, you know, I'm taking that into consideration. But what I want to do is provide the service chiefs and secretaries an opportunity to also review it. And I want to engage in a dialogue with them and make sure that, you know, I have their input, their thoughts. I've always found in the short period of time that I've been associated with the military that that's the best path to follow, to make sure that that you have a good dialogue with the stakeholders, because at the end of the day, whatever is decided, we're all going to have to execute it. So.
Quick follow-up. Has that never come up, that issue never come up in any of the meetings that you've had with the service secretaries or the chiefs in the time that you've been in your position?
I've given them specific guidance in terms of, you know, my desire to have them review the recommendation, and then I want their feedback on that, and then we're gonna discuss it. So, yeah.
Tony?
Sir, on Afghanistan, the U.S. has been spending about $40 billion a year for the last 3 or 4 years on the conflict. Do you expect a budget gain, a reallocation from those dollars that you won't be spending now after September 11th? And for General Milley, has that been a discussion in the tank at all among the chiefs that we're going to have extra dollars because we're not going to be in Afghanistan? How do we handle the extra money? Mr. Secretary?
Well, thanks. As you know, a great deal of the funds that we use to fund our efforts, not only there but in Iraq, was funded with OCO rather than a base budget. Certainly, anytime you stop doing something that's this important and this big, it creates opportunities, and so we'll look at what the possibilities are going forward as opportunities are created. Certainly, we'll be sighted in on our overall strategy and making sure that we prioritize our resources to match the strategy, and so more to follow. But we're in the middle of or the final stages of really outlining the budget for 22, and then we'll get busy on the 23 budget and beyond. So
the 22 budget reflects some of these reallocations from Afghanistan to other areas?
Again, I don't want to try to get ahead of the budget process, and this is, I'm not making a budget announcement from the podium today. But again, the basic logic is, and I think you would agree with this, that anytime you stop doing something that's that large, then it creates opportunities for other areas, and we'll have to define what those opportunities are and prioritize the opportunities.
Sir, has that become a discussion in the tank?
No, we're not really focused on the budget part of that. For the Joint Chiefs, we're focused on the execution and fulfilling the President's intent right now.
Thank you.
Let me go to somebody on the phone here. I haven't done that. Missy Ryan.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I have a question, a follow-up question regarding Afghanistan, and then a question for you, General Milley. So my follow-up on Afghanistan is building on the earlier questions about air support. If I understood correctly, that the U.S. post-withdrawal will be providing funding and over-the-horizon logistical support, but not routine air support to the ANSF. Does that mean that if there was a scenario where cities are being advanced upon by Taliban forces, that the United States will not provide over-the-horizon air support in some way to the Afghan forces? And then my question for you, General Milley, is regarding the interpreters who have worked with the United States in Afghanistan. And there's been a discussion about the special immigrant visas and the backlog of applicants who are waiting as the United States prepares to withdraw. I know that this is a state-led question, but given your own service in Afghanistan and that of the men and women that you command in uniform, what is your perspective on the fate of the Afghans who are hoping to get visas to come to the United States through that program? Thanks.
Hi, Missy. I think you heard me say earlier that again, our focus is on making sure that we can retrograde our resources, our troops, our allies, in a safe and orderly and responsible fashion. Beyond that, we'll look to establish some over-the-horizon CT capability and some over-the-horizon logistical support capabilities. We'll continue to support the Afghan government and the Afghan military with financial support with the help of Congress. In terms of what we would do in any one given situation to respond to something that was unanticipated or may have been anticipated, but I don't think it's helpful for me to get engaged in any kind of hypotheticals today. But I certainly appreciate your question. And General Milley, over to you.
On the Missy, on the interpreters and others that have worked closely with the U.S. government, the intent is with State Department in the lead is to make sure that it's really a moral imperative that we take care of those that have worked closely with us if their lives are in danger, et cetera. But I would also caution some folks on some speculation here. It's a bit early to tell what the outcomes are going to be. There are some obviously bad outcomes that have been discussed, but none of that is preordained. None of it is absolutely inevitable. Again, this is a significant size military and police force. The government under President Ghani is still a cohesive organization. There are a lot of factors at play here, and I think it's we're working through the SIV process through the State Department, but I think it's a bit early to really sound the alarm on getting everybody out just yet. That's my own personal opinion, but I think that's based on some pretty good knowledge of what's going on right now.
Major General Austin and Colonel Milley were in Afghanistan together when Colonel Milley helped to stand up the 1st Battalion of Afghan forces. And so, as he mentioned today, there's over 300,000 Afghan security forces now, which speaks to the great work that your soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have done over the years. And that's larger than the military of a number of countries, but it's they have been operating principally, providing much of their support on their own in recent months. So we're hopeful. We all want to see the Afghans succeed. And again, once our roles change here a bit, we'll continue to provide support from in terms of logistics and financial support, and we'll focus on our over-the-horizon CT capabilities.
Time for just a couple more. I'll go back to the phones. Phil Stewart.
Thanks. Just a clarification, Secretary Austin, were there orders to withdraw all U.S. contractors? I know there's orders to withdraw all U.S. troops. And for General Milley, do you have any estimates on what will happen to ANSF attrition rates following the U.S. withdrawal? Thanks.
Yeah, so we're going to responsibly retrograde all of our capabilities that we are responsible for, and the contractors fall in that realm as well. So, I mean, as you know, contractors have the ability to renegotiate contracts if they so choose going forward in the future. But yeah, we're going to account for all the people and the resources that are working with us. So.
Your question on the attrition rates has to go with can the Afghan security forces sustain the fight at current attrition rates, or attrition rates that have been an average over the last year or so? Again, I would say that we have to wait and see in the coming months. We know what their attrition rates are in killed and wounded. We know what their desertion rates are. We also know that the Taliban have suffered significant attrition rates as well. I would also remind folks that there's still an active Department of State-led negotiation effort ongoing. So that is also another avenue that is being actively pursued by the U.S. government to come up with a negotiated settlement between the government and the Taliban. That door is not been closed yet. So there's a lot of possible outcomes here.
Last one, Tara.
Thank you. This question is for both of you. General Milley, last week you shared a bit of how your thinking has evolved on taking sexual assault out of the chain of command. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. What prompted that change of thought for you? And General Austin, as you have, I'm sorry, Secretary, have it again. Secretary Austin.
You'll get me in trouble if you say that.
I got myself in trouble probably. Yeah. As you view this recommendation, I guess the question is, why not take sexual assault investigations outside of the chain of command? At this point, it seems like nothing else has worked, and there have been a number of military sexual assault victims who have been failed by the current system.
Yeah, you should know that, as I've said before, that this is very important to me, and it's very important to this entire department. And we're going to stay sighted on this until we find ways to improve. I think the accountability piece of it is a very important piece, but it's not the only piece. There are climate issues. There are how we take care of victims issues. There are a number of things that the Independent Review Commission are looking at that will add to this entire picture here. I think it's the combination of those things that will cause us to begin to move forward on this. So if, as we look at what's been presented, it could be perfect, a perfect recommendation, or it may be, there may be a recommendation that that we may choose to go another path. But I think it's worth having our leaders, engage in discussion on this. Now, I think, you know, we've done things a certain way for a while, and I think, you know, we really need to kind of broaden our horizons and begin to look at things differently and be willing to take different paths to improve things.
So does that mean that your thinking also might have evolved on this and that you're open to taking it out of the chain of command?
You know, I said when we started down this path that, you know, all options are on the table. And I want to hear from the Review Commission good recommendations that we think that can make a difference. And again, I think we have to let the Review Commission do its work. And then I would like to do our work in terms of engaging our leaders and making sure that we have outlined a good, effective path for the department going forward.
And for me, I'm going to wait until we see the final results of the Review Commission. But I was the chief of the Army for 4 years, been the chairman for coming up on 2. And frankly, you asked me what has caused me to have a change here, and I've given a lot of hard thought. We haven't moved the needle. That's the bottom line. We haven't resolved this issue. According to some pretty solid data, we estimate, based on some surveys, that there were probably 20,000 men and women who were sexually assaulted in the United States military last year. That's 1% of the force. If we had 20,000 killed or wounded in Afghanistan or Iraq, those are casualties. That's huge. That's significant. And that number hasn't significantly been reduced over time. And we keep saying, people like me, keep going behind a microphone in front of committees saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this, we need to do that. And it hasn't changed. So we need to take a hard look, and I welcome the Independent Review Commission and their views, and I want to take a hard look at them. They're going to be evidence-based, and we're going to move in directions that are going to fundamentally change this to try to solve it. Every one of us wants it solved, but 20,000 is a huge number, and it's just not, we can't tolerate that. We can't tolerate that level of divisiveness in our force. These are assaults. These are blue-on-blue assaults. It cannot stand. It has to be resolved. So yes, my mind is very open to it. And the other thing that changed or that influenced me significantly is the data that I saw over the last, several months about the confidence in the chain of command by junior soldiers, men and women alike, in their ability to deal successfully with sexual assault. And we, the chain of command, we, the generals, the colonels, the captains, and so on, we have lost the trust and confidence of those subordinates in our ability to deal with sexual assault. So we need to make a change. What that change is, we'll see what the Independent Review Commission comes up with in terms of their recommendations, and we'll take a hard look at it, and we'll have discussions with the Secretary and so on. But absolutely, my mind is completely open to all kinds of opportunities to change here.
And once we make decisions and head down a path, that's not the end of the day. You know, we will continue to work this until we improve, and then we'll stay sighted on it to make sure that we have the right things in the environment, that we're taking care of our troops, men and women, and that we're doing the right things. So
that's all we got time for, folks. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Former Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher basically admitting to murder.
I'm sure that I know that the Navy is looking into that issue, and so I don't have a comment for you this afternoon.
Thank you.
Oh, he
Thank you.
admitted to the murder of an ISIS